And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. Looks like the UN Security Council just wrapped up. So let's keep it moving with more of these top headlines. Let's go to Washington now. Live picture there at the U.S. Capitol and at the White House. And still, the fallout continues over this tweet that Elon Musk of Doge sent over the weekend regarding the 2 million strong federal workforce. Telling federal employees at federal agencies to list 5 things that they did the prior week and email them in by a deadline tonight. We're going to be talking about this even more. Fox's Rebecca Castor, though, filed this report. Let's watch.
Federal employees have a question to answer. What did you do last week? Elon Musk and Doge want to know and are giving workers until 11:59 tonight to respond to an email listing 5 accomplishments.
If you can't name 5 things that you did last week, then you should not be on the government payroll.
But some workers are being told not to respond, including staff at the FBI and the Pentagon. Meanwhile, time is up for federal employees working remotely.
It's a tremendous waste of taxpayer dollars to be paying for people and offices that are not showing up for work.
Elon Musk says starting this week, those who still fail to return to office will be placed on administrative leave. And he defended his aggressive cost-cutting measures at the conservative CPAC conference last week.
It's money that's taken away from things that are destructive to the country and from organizations that hate you to you. That's awesome.
Thousands of federal workers have already lost their jobs, with as many as 200,000 potentially out the door. In addition, 75,000 employees accepted buyouts.
If I could say one thing to Elon Musk, it's like, please put a dose of compassion in this. These are real people. These are real lives. These are mortgages. It's a false narrative to say we have to cut and you have to be cruel to do it as well. We can do both.
A new federal lawsuit challenging Musk's threat to fire federal workers who don't list their accomplishments was filed in California Monday. In Washington, Rebecca Castor, Fox News.
Rebecca, thanks so much. Back out live there to the White House. This was the tweet that kind of started all of this off. Elon Musk saying, consistent with President Trump's instructions, all federal employees will shortly receive an email requesting to understand what they got done last week. He says failure to respond will be taken as a resignation. So we're about to bring into the conversation some analysis on this and other matters in the Trump administration. Stand by. All right, like I said, we do want to keep it moving, though, with this conversation. Want to bring into the conversation there at the Washington Examiner, columnist Tiana Lowe Doescher. She joins me. Tiana, thanks for being with us here. I know you've been following all of this extremely closely. I guess I have to ask, you know, with some of these federal agencies, it seems like the message to some of the workforces underneath them is mixed. Hey, you got to abide by this, what Elon Musk said, or you don't. So is this causing unnecessary confusion?
This is certainly the most high-level pushback that we've seen from the executive branch itself against Doge's, let's say, the accusations of overreach. So you have specifically in an HHS memo, Secretary Kennedy has changed gears a couple of times, first saying respond, then saying don't respond. And the third guidance now says, if you do respond, be broad enough that you can assume that foreign adversaries could intercept these emails. And that's in part because unlike Doge's buyout for those federal workers that agreed to resign and get 8 months paid sabbatical, this doesn't seem that it has gone through the whole Trump administration's clearance. It's not necessarily clear that the Oval Office knew about it, which of course brings up the classification issue, which is why you have the FBI very notably saying, do not respond to these emails.
You know, Tiana, I have to ask, though, does Doge run the risk of moving too fast, too soon here? Is this a perfect example? Because I think a lot of people watching, they're asking themselves, you know, if I was a federal worker at one of these federal agencies, where does Elon Musk come off? He's not my boss. Why do I have to follow what he says in a tweet over the weekend telling him what I did the previous week? Is that a valid thing to think right now?
Yes, and also crucially, he's not Senate confirmed, right? So at the end of the day, if you work for the FBI, you listen to Kash Patel because that's your legal advisor, right? In Silicon Valley, the motto is move fast and break things. And I am not at all going to discredit how successful Elon Musk has been at that. If you take a company like Twitter, he's able to slash the workforce by what, 75%, and it's still highly operational, right? He proved all of his haters wrong when it came to Twitter. The federal government is a different beast. And a better way of thinking about a lot of this guidance is that he's trying to get people to leave voluntarily. Federal workers are not like private sector workers. If you are there past that initial probationary period, it is extremely hard to fire you without cause. And even if you do have cause, there's a 30-day notice. You have the right to appeal. And if your appeal to an outside agency wins, you get full back pay and benefits, right? So part of why they're going after these probationary workers with a very broad mechanism is because they just want to get at anyone who they can. And that means you will get some babies thrown out with the bathwater.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way to go about this is important too. Do you think Elon Musk, though, is undercutting the rationale or the intent of why this is needed? You know, trimming the budget deficit, the debt, trimming the federal workforce. From a conservative standpoint, everyone's on board with that. But if you don't do it correctly or right, that runs the risk, right, of alienating people, even though the intentions are good.
So I think even more so than the email thing, because what Trump and Musk both have done extremely well throughout their entire careers is making their opponents defend the less defensive, right? Elon, on principle, sending out an email asking 2 million federal employees to respond with what their jobs are, that can feel, you know, a little bit schoolmarmy. But the fact is, in the private sector, you have to do that all the time. You have to do reports of what you've worked on. And the fact that you have federal workers filing lawsuits over that makes it seem like, you know, if you get in the gutter with the pig, you're also going to get mud on you. But the bigger issue is indeed, like, if you think about the cost-cutting mechanism of Doge, you know, a couple million here, a couple million there, is 1.5 million in, like, let's say NIH funding for medical research. That includes Alzheimer's. We currently spend $250 billion just in Medicare and Medicaid on Alzheimer's treatment, right? So why would you want to undercut the research that in the long run actually could save the taxpayer money? And that will be, I think, the longer political fight.
So, Tiana, though, Musk, though, it seems, is operating on the assumption that federal workers don't do anything all day. Is that fair?
Of course, it's not fair. Like in any work, first of all, the federal workforce is huge. It is at least 2 million civilian workers. And remember, a lot of these, you know, when we talk about DEI and whatnot, yeah, there are a lot of positions where we don't want to have DEI coordinators at USAID to help out gender affirming clinics in Guatemala. But like one form of what is effectively affirmative action is for our veterans. We do have a certain class of employment that is designed to help veterans transition back out of the military, because we know that is a difficult transition, and we know it's not operated like private sector employment where it's about maximizing, you know, the shareholder value. And so, no, it's not fair to paint with such a broad brush. And there is the issue, politically speaking, that I think Trump is less scared about, but that within Northern Virginia, where you have so many employees who don't just work directly for the federal government, but also are contractors, are reliant on some of these grants, that could really hurt the Republicans' hopes in the upcoming Virginia elections.
Yeah, I mean, have we seen any polling yet with regard to the American people and how they think the Doge efforts are going? We've seen a lot. I've seen a lot on social media of some of these Republican members of Congress going back to their districts and getting an earful from constituents about what Doge is doing. I mean, we're only a month into this administration. So does Doge run the risk of alienating voters?
I think the issue is if it becomes a distraction and the Trump administration can't follow through on those key issues, right? Because right now you have a totally separate debate on the Hill is about extending the Trump tax cut. And while, Democratic critics like to point that as, oh, it's a tax cut for the wealthy, the fact is that if the TCJA isn't extended, you are looking at 62% of households seeing a tax increase at the start of 2026, which is a midterm election year. So it is important for the middle class and for the working class that those tax cuts get extended in a way that it's sustainable. So the issue becomes if Doge stops the Trump administration from focusing on, let's say, solving the bird flu, which is a cause of the egg price explosion, right? Egg prices exploded by 15% in January alone. And clearly that is a problem that started under Biden. And it was the Biden administration that really dropped the ball on the vaccinating the chickens, right? But that's something where Doge accidentally fired some of the agriculture department workers that were working on solving that epidemic.
Yeah, we put up our live picture there at the White House because I do have a statement in from the White House about this email and this tweet from Musk. So OPM, that is the Office of Personnel Management, that's like the federal government's HR, told HR leaders from federal agencies they're not mandating employees be fired if they don't reply to the OMP's 5 things email by tonight's midnight deadline. So, as you know, Musk tweeted that a failure to reply would be taken as a resignation. And Trump even said today in the Oval Office that if you don't answer, you're semi-fired or fired, noting exceptions like what you had mentioned, Tiana, for DOD and FBI and confidentiality concerns. The White House saying in his statement this: everyone is working together as one unified team at the direction of President Trump. Any notion to the contrary is completely false here. So you don't see any cleavage from Trump and Musk on this. What does it mean you're fired or semi-fired?
Well, Trump has made it clear that Elon has the mandate, right? Trump has said, he put out his Truth Social over the weekend saying, I want Elon to move faster. And a part of this is not just getting rid of those probationary workers that don't want to have the oversight, but also just reorienting the executive branch away from this notion that it's an unelected, but also unaccountable bureaucracy. And the idea is, look, constitutionally speaking, if you work for the Agriculture Department, HHS, any of these agencies, you work at the pleasure of the president. And while we have, created some legal structures to try and have the veneer of independence, regulatory agencies, the Federal Reserve, really, if you're working in a political position, especially, the idea is that, yes, you should be accountable to the administration's wishes because Trump does not want a repeat of being sabotaged as he was during his first term.
Okay, 2 more headlines we want to get to. Tiana, thanks for being with us here. An announcement over the weekend, a pretty big pick at the FBI for deputy director. President Trump made this official in a post on Truth Social. Dan Bongino, of course, he used to work at the Fox News channel. Who is he? Why is he so controversial here? From my understanding, he's never worked at the FBI before, so why would Trump pick him as deputy director to Kash Patel here? Do you think this is a good pick?
So I actually do think it's quite an inspired pick, especially when you consider what Trump really prioritizes. We know he loves effective communicators, and we've seen it work to his benefit already. After the 4 years of Joe Biden's administration feeling so silent and feeling so unaccountable, it was nice seeing, the morning after that horrible plane crash in D.C., seeing Pete Hegseth just do straight to Twitter selfie video explaining an update. And I think we'll see definitely more of that with Dan Bongino. But Bongino's background is Secret Service. And a part of this pivot is to more broadly consider the FBI reorienting itself back towards its mission as law enforcement rather than just merely intelligence. And more importantly, these intelligence operations that have been heavily criticized, not just by Republicans today, but also in the aftermath of 9/11 as entrapment. And so with Bongino, you're really going to see a focus, I think, on that law enforcement apparatus of FBI, where the FBI has had problems far beyond the political issues that Trump has cared about.
Usually, though, the deputy director is one of these senior federal law enforcement agents within the agency itself. And some of the FBI agents associations and other unions that represent those members They're stunned by this pick because it is such a departure from the norm. I mean, does Bongino have his work cut out there at the agency to win them over, the rank and file?
Certainly, but I think that Bongino's argument would be this is the mandate that Trump entered office, even more so than Doge, right? Trump did not run as a incredibly staunch, budget hawk. He did not say, I'm going to cut Social Security, Medicare, any of that. But he ran very explicitly against the deep state, and this has been part of the messaging at least since 2020, if not before that. And so I think Bongino's argument will be, there has to be an institutional respect for people that have more, let's say, managerial expertise within the bureau, but also that if you don't want to play ball, if we're going to get more of, what wound up being unearthed with Crossfire Hurricane in the aftermath of Russiagate, those are people that he doesn't want working for him anyways. And that's I think, part of the strategy of picking someone who is very much a firebrand. And I think Bongino would refer to himself as that as well.
Yeah, and it's, common knowledge, is no secret, that President Trump himself is deeply distrustful of the FBI here. Kind of one more headline. We've been following here on Live Now from Fox the kind of battle in court between the Associated Press and the White House. Our live picture there at the White House. We learned today, because the parties were in court, that the judge in the case, McFadden, denied the AP's emergency motion to restore its access to White House press pool events. But the judge ordered expedited consideration of the matter, given the weighty issues at the heart of this. So this was just a denial of an emergency motion. It seems like the issue on the merits will continue there in court. The White House, with this statement, Caroline Leavitt, saying, as we have said from the beginning, asking the President of the United States questions in the Oval Office and aboard Air Force One is a privilege granted to journalists, not a legal right. We stand by our decision to hold the fake news accountable for their lies, and President Trump will continue to grant an unprecedented level of access to the press. She says this is the most transparent administration in history. So we just have to kind of wait and see how this resolves itself, but the Associated Press was not in the room there in the East Room today at the White House for the joint press conference between French President Macron and President Trump here, though apparently some of the French press pool did defer to the Associated Press bureau reporter out of Paris to ask a question there. Do you see this purely on free speech grounds, or is there something more to it than that?
No, I mean, it's fundamentally, like, from a legal perspective, it's hard to see how it's a First Amendment issue, because the issue isn't about communication, it's about access, right?
Sure.
There are tons of podcasters, independent reporters, local newspapers that cover what President Trump does, but they don't receive access. They don't have that hard pass. They don't have that permanent room in the briefing room. The bigger issue, and I think why you're really seeing the Trump administration triple down on it, is it's kind of trying to play the left at their own game. We saw for years the Associated Press, instead of referring to a transgender man as biological man who transitioned, go to assigned male at birth, right? As though somehow that's a wrong, like the doctor messed up. We saw them no longer using terms illegal aliens instead of undocumented. They refused to refer to the southern border crisis as a crisis when you started reaching 100,000 crossings per month under the Biden administration. And so Trump is just trying to say, if you guys are fine changing the wording for all these other liberal pet causes, why not call it Gulf of America if, legally speaking, that's, what the NOAA will call it, if that's what Google Maps is going to call it. And especially, it's not an inflammatory name. Mexico still considers itself part of the Americas more broadly.
Sure.
And so it's a bit of trolling for certain, but it's trolling to what they see as an edge of teaching them a lesson.
Okay, but should the White House right now, I mean, we're a month in, devoting their time, energy, and resources to trolling in this way? Of course, the Associated Press is a free, fair, independent media organization. They can say whatever they want. They can call it whatever they want, right?
Yes. No, I agree with you. Look, if there's any lesson from Trump term one, and his administration would be wise to remember it, you can call Gulf of America whatever you want and yell at the Associated Press whatever you want, as long as you get those egg prices down. And the fact is that voters feel much more pessimistic about the economy now than they did throughout especially those first 3 years of the Trump administration. And while he does get a bit of a grace period because he did inherit inflation that was worsening at the end of the Biden administration, we saw it with the January inflation reports that have just come up. But there's TikTok. Trump was elected for many reasons, but first among them was to bring prices down. And if he does not do that, Gulf of America, Twitter trolling, none of it matters.
All right, Tiana, Lowe, Doescher, we appreciate your time, your expertise, and your insight. We'll definitely talk soon. Thanks so much.